Hey guys, welcome back to the Darth Kilhoon channel. This is your host, Darth Kilhoon, as we get into part 2 of the Horus Heresy novel, False Gods. And oh my god, is this part just packed full of stuff. I absolutely love part 2. It was fun to listen to. I'm sorry it took so long to get to it, but I have just been uberly busy. Just very, very busy. But immediately this part just drew me in as the battle for Davin's moon, called Murder of all places, kicks off. And the Space Marines, the Adeptus Astartes of the Astartes Legion, the Sons of Horus, along with a very small detachment of the Word Bearers under Erebus, assault the moon. And they are encountered by plague zombies of Nurgle. And they are fighting tooth and nail and thick fog that just obscures all their vision. They have to fight close quarters. Everything's like within just reaching distance. That's how close the combat is described. And occasionally the fog clears and they can see a bit farther, but for the most part, they are just tooth and nail in this battle. No quarter, no nothing. And the zombies, they are just never ending on the Mournival, and roughly, I would think it would be 800 Astartes and probably about few tens of thousands of Imperial Army soldiers as they make their way towards the cruiser, the Glory of Terra, and they're advancing, making their way through the zombies, but the Imperial Army units are kind of lagging behind them because the Astartes are just focused on the target. And Gabriel Woken, he tries to point that out to Horus, but they just ignore it, keep on going on. Well, then the army kind of lags behind. There's too much distance between them. And they suffer for that because then the horde just kind of cuts off between the two armies, and they're separated, they can't support each other, and it just turns into a grinding war of attrition. But then it is interrupted by the Titans, who are dropped from the fleet orbiting, and they just blast swaths through the probably hundreds of thousands of zombies, just blasting their plasma cannons at them and crushing them beneath their feet. If this was a visual, it'd probably be an epic scene to be sure, as no zombie movie is truly ever that great when it's filmed, but when it's described, you can just kind of fill in the gaps and see what is happening. But then it cuts over to the Rembrandtser, Petronella Vivar, and she decides that she's not going to be staying on the Vengeful Spirit, and orders her shuttle to come around and pick her up, so that way they can go down to the surface to actually see a battle take place. And well, she gets what she wishes. She takes her shuttle down, and before she knows it, her pilot can't see anything through the fog and mist and nearly crash into the D Ares Titan, and it shoots down her shuttle, only disabling it, but eventually coming to, it crashes, and the flames from the fuel of her burning shuttle attract the Sons of Horus to her shuttle, because they can't see a thing, but they see kind of like this glowing off fire in the distance, and they huddle around it. They regroup there. A couple hundred Astartes that survived, led by Horus of all. And they get to the shuttle, rescue Vivar, and form a defense. Specifically, Horus crushes a zombie's head that's trying to attack Vivar, and gets it before it can get her. And then after they fight for probably a few hours. They whittle down the zombies enough that they can actually like see the glory of Terra, and they make their way to it, escorting Vivar behind them. And Horus takes Captain Moy of it's either the 18th or the 19th Company, but he takes Captain Moy in with him into the Glory of Terra, where he immediately just get like swarmed by zombies. It's very close quarters, like fighting for each corridor at a time. And they're making their way to the bridge. Horus is eventually separated from Captain Moy. Captain Moy getting ahead of him and getting to the bridge first and encountering kind of he's not really he's barely an antagonist, he's just more of a plot point, a minion, but Temba, Captain Temba, that Horus left behind to kind of be like the administrator of the Davin system, and Horus confronts him. Well, first Captain Moy confronts him and dies probably a very painful death. Just killed. And Horus comes up to the bridge, finds Temba standing over the corpse of Captain Moy, and draws a sword, and they at first have a conversation about the powers of chaos. At first, Horus is kind of like, man, no, that's not true. Horus is just a energy field, and then Temba's like, no, you can harness it. It has a will of its own, and it gave me great power, and yada yada. And he can't convince Horus, but they duel, and Temba gets a wound on Horus with the Anathame blade, which this is the second book in the series. In the first book, the Anathame was like a special sword that if you spoke the name into the name of somebody, it would target that specific person. And if you were able to land a blow on them, like it would kill them either way, no matter where you wounded them. So he gets a blow on Horus on his shoulder, but eventually Horus takes a day stabbing him with his sword. And as Temba's dying in his arms, he regrets what he did. He says that he was weak and the powers of the warp enticed him, but Horus still is kind of like, no, there's no powers in the warp. You were just deceived by the power itself. And he was like, no, it has a will, it has a conscience, and I gave into its whispers of power and glory. And he dies there in Horus's hand. Horus regrets leaving him there because he saw what happened to Temba, because he was one of his sons. Like, he was a captain and officer. And he had left him there not knowing the weakness of Temba. But then he kind of like stumbles out of the ship. All the zombies just die all of a sudden, and as Captain Loken and Captain Torgaden, they are fighting for their lives and nearly die by the zombies' hands when they all collapse around them, and they're like, what the hell happened here? Kind of like that dumbfounded phase. But then they see Horus emerge from the wreckage, and he's kind of stumbling, so then his sons, the Astartes, take him up, kind of like help him. But then he talks with Vivar a little bit, but then collapses before them, and all hell breaks loose. All the Astartes are just panicking. They're trying to get him up. They call the apothecaries over, try to heal him, but it fails, and they can't do anything about it. So then they drag him back up to the ship, where rumor had already started to spread that the War Master had collapsed and that he was probably dead. And some of the other Rembrandters are discussing it, and they're eating specifically in their own little corner of the ship, in their corner, when they hear this, and they make their way down to the medical bay where civilians and soldiers and crew members of the ship are getting in the way of the Astartes, making their way to the medical bay, when the Astartes just like backhand all of them, and since they're superhumans, they kill most of them or severely injure them, like breaking most of the bones in their body probably. As they're escorting the Primarch to the medical bay where they get him to the apothecaries, they try to heal him, it fails, and they don't know what to do. All these Sons of Horus are panicking because this is literally their father dying before them. And Horus, he knows that he's dying, and he wants to leave a legacy behind, so he calls Vivar in to document his final words, which end up being several hours long before he slips into a coma and so on. But then I'll get to that in a minute, because then it pans over to Magnus the Red, another Primarch of the Thousand Suns Legion, and he is the most powerful psyker of all the Primarchs, and he's experimenting with a warp. And he's doing his experimentations, and he says to his chief librarian Airman that he's going to prove his father wrong about the warp, and he's going to show him the power of it and how they can use it and harness it. But that's all you see of now, but he's just preparing to go transfer his essence into the warp to study it. And then it goes to Gavriel Loken and Torgaden, where they are just panicking with the other Sons of Horus, Mournival. They're just panicking, and Loken deducts that it was something that wounded Horus because there's only this one wound that isn't healing on him, and that they can't patch up, and that's the blow on his shoulder that shouldn't be killing him, but yet it is. It's making him bleed out. So he's like, oh, there must be a weapon down there that we can search for and hopefully deduct what's actually killing him. So he and Torgaden, they come up with a plan to go find whichever weapon gave him this blow and give it to the apothecaries to deduct a cure for it, or just something to try to save him. But then Captain Mar, he was Captain Moy's best friend and near and twin, almost they were brothers until the end, closer than the other brothers in the Legion. And he goes down with his company too. They get to then they go back to the planet. The planet, it cleared up after, there's no more fog. All the rotting was starting to decay, and it wasn't there anymore because the powers of Nurgle that behind Temba was gone. So the planet was reverting back to its natural state, or the moon, I'd say. But they get there, they make their way up to the bridge of the Glory of Terra, they find the corpse, dig through the corpse, and find the Anathane blade, and Loken specifically, he recognizes the blade. He recognizes that it was part of the Interrex, the civilization that in the last book that they encountered that had made this incredible weapon, and they were like, well, who gave him this blade? And then he just figures it out that Erebus, he went to the planet before, and he was the only man that could possibly deliver this weapon to Temba. And deducts that Erebus is behind this, that he was trying to kill Horus, and he was complacent in it. He convinced Horus to go down to the planet because he knew that he would personally encounter Temba and he would be dealt this blow. Initially, he thinks that it's more like a coup attempt to try to take out Horus and get another Primarch as the War Master instead of him. But then it just pans over to back up to the Vengeful Spirit from the planet, where Erebus had called a lodge meeting while Loken and Torgadon were on the planet because they were the only two that weren't members of the Warrior Lodge and that would object to any proposals that he made. So he calls the other Mournival members and the Lodge members to session because he's also a member of the Lodge. And he says that there's only one way. We tried everything. Everything's failed to revive the War Master. So there's this temple on Davin that is like this healing temple. And he convinces the panicking, especially Captain Abaddon, who is just like, he can't imagine a life without Horus. He's like, no, he's my father. I'm going to die before him. He is this great god of a being, and we can't just let him die. If we do that, then we have failed him. So he takes Erebus' suggestion, rallies the rest of the Mournival to bring Horus's corpse down to the planet. They specifically escort him, all the 7 members of the Mournival that are left, and take his corpse to the temple, to the Serpent Temple on Davin. And Loken and Torgadon are making their way back, but they learn that Horus's corpse isn't on the Vengeful Sphere anymore, and that his corpse had been taken down to the planet's surface. So they try to intercept it. Loken specifically tells his Astartes in his Thunderhawk gunship to be ready for battle. They ready their weapons. And they ready their weapons. They descend to the planet. And he looks out the window of the Thunderhawk, or which viewport or whatever, and he sees the Mournival escorting him down on the surface. So he lands the gunship, runs out with his Astartes, ready for battle, running past the human inhabitants of the planet, noticing that they had probably been that they are so mutated humans that they are barely human themselves, but they still bow to the Astartes as they ran by, trying to intercept the other Mournival members escorting Horus's corpse. They make their way through the temple's garden and up to the temple itself, where they spot their grieving Mournival members, and they're all just standing there in pure shock, which, without their helmets, they're not ready for battle, they're just there. And he stops, he asks them what happened, and what are they doing? And they said that they put Horus in there because Erebus told them this is a temple of healing, and if their spirits or whatever are able to heal Horus, on the 9th day he'll walk out of this temple fully healed, if the spirits deem him worthy, or else they're going to have to burn his corpse and put it in the pond of the temple. So, of course, Loken and Torgadon object to this. They're like, you're trusting in magics and spirits. Don't you understand that in this Imperium, we aren't these zealots. We don't believe in gods and the divine and things that have held humanity back for centuries in their eyes. And, of course, then Abaddon's like, no, you're wrong. Like, if we don't do anything, he's just going to die anyway. So we're going to put our faith into this. Have faith in this healing ritual, and maybe we'll be rewarded with our father back. So, and then that's where it leaves off. But then going back to Horus, as he is bleeding out on the bed and talking to Vivar asks him, like, well, what was it like being War Master? And Horus is like, well, when I was first united with my father, we didn't need a War Master because the Emperor led from the front, and I fought with the Emperor side by side in every battle on many worlds for 30 years. And then only recently had the Emperor taken a seat back from the battlefield, and he abandoned them, he abandoned his brothers, and then he destroyed the War Council, which used to be like this governing body of the Astartes that were essentially running the Imperium, all the administrative work, all the logistics, running of planets, etc. But the Emperor had replaced it with a Council of Terra, which was a legislative body conducting most of the day-to-day operations of the Imperium and giving the Astartes legions their orders, which disgusted Abaddon. He was like, no, these are just pathetic humans. We should be the rulers of the galaxy. We are superior. And the fact that his position as War Master had been essentially usurped by all these forces within the Astartes, within the Imperium, and betrayed by the Emperor. He is just disgusted. But then he was like, well, and my brother Lionel Johnson and Rabute Gilman, which are his main rivals, that they are just going to get a kick out of this. Like, I died in the most pathetic way possible, and they're going to say on my deathbed that I was not worthy to be a War Master. Which in a way is kind of right. Rabute Gilman is a good administrator, and Lionel Johnson is a better general overall. But Horus is more charismatic. He has the ambition to have the position of War Master. And he says, that's why I was chosen. I had the ambition. I had the vision to go forward in this office. And I deserved it above all my other brothers. So, and he was like, he said that, oh yes, I thank Mortarion and Fulgrim, Rogel Dorn, and Conrad Kurz for them supporting me the whole way. And with me being War Master, while my other brothers were stabbing me in the back, saying that I wasn't worthy. But then Vivar asks him, well, if it wasn't you, then who would you pick to be War Master? And he kind of pauses, he deliberates, but he knows his answer. And he says it's his brother Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels, and the literal emperor, the angel of the Emperor. And it says on that he is the pure embodiment of everything our Imperium stands for. He is charismatic, enlightened, he's a philosopher, he's a noble warrior, he's honorable, he embodies the Emperor in everything that he does. He's like the mini Emperor in every single way. And he's charismatic, and he can inspire people where the other Primarchs can't. And he glorifies Sanguinius, and that's where it leaves off. But they say that he spoke with her for many more hours, just kind of like giving his final words, because he doesn't know how long he'll have. But then, yeah, this was very eventful part, and it was roughly the same length. It was actually a little bit shorter than part 1, now that I think about it. It was shorter, but it was so packed full of things, like just switching between scenes over and over again. It was like suddenly you were fighting zombies. Next thing you know, it's up to Horus having a duel with this giant bloated walking corpse that used to be Temba. And then next thing you know, Horus is dying and everybody's panicking and no one knows what to do. It's just overall it's a very tenuous moment, and everything's happening at once. But this is like the pinnacle. This is the point of no return for Horus. As soon as Abaddon and the rest of the Mourner will shove him into that temple, part 3 is going to explain what happens to him and how he gets further manipulated on his path, on his ambitions and his hatred for the Imperium, and he knows what he's going to do to eventually betray the Imperium and try to make himself its ruler. But that is for the next part. Thank you guys for joining me today. This is Darth Kilhoun signing off.